So welcome everyone. So today we're going to be talking about the best browsers and the most useful apps for seniors. We'll go into a bit more detail as to what types of apps we're looking at and what is an app in the first place. And at the same time, I'll be talking about browsers and also email platforms alongside that. Some of this may be review from previous presentations, but a lot of this is new content. So again, feel free to ask questions as we go along or at the end of the presentation. So we'll start off on a very general basis talking about internet browsers and email platforms and basically what those are and things to look out for when choosing one. So simply said, when you think of an internet browser, you could think of a lot of things, right? You could think of Google Chrome, Firefox, whatever internet browser you're using right now to log into the presentation. There's a variety of options, and a lot of different companies have put out those options as a way to sort of give people access to the internet and to search up different things. With that being said, though, it can be kind of confusing as to know which one to use in the first place, right? If you have an Apple device, it automatically
Television and
comes with
this and
Safari.
that.
With some other websites or with other devices, they may not have an internet browser to begin with. And that could be hard to figure out, how do I get onto the internet? How do I go to Google, right? But even more than that, say you use your browser to look up something or to log into your email, there are different cues and different things that make each website a little bit different. And those can appear differently on whatever internet browser you're using. So, for instance, if you open up Safari by itself, it will look different from when you open up Google Chrome by itself. Safari, you may not see the big Google sign at the very beginning in the search tab. It may just show you different apps that you use or different websites that you frequent. So when choosing internet browsers, and I'll talk about a few options that would be good to consider. Um, Consider whether you're comfortable with the interface. So Google Chrome and Firefox and Opera are known to be very easy on the eyes. You know, they have very large text. Everything's very easy to navigate. You know where things are. Versus, say, like Edge or Internet Explorer, those may be a bit more complicated to get around because it serves a different audience. Um, if you're comfortable with the interface, so a big conversation is my information, being sold, or is it being taken, or is my history, being taken or recorded? Certain browsers have expressed that that's the case. So obviously for big power players like Safari and Google Chrome, that may be the case, that they are taking tabs of whatever you're looking up, and that may be how they suggest different things. Versus if you use a platform like DuckDuckGo or GoDaddy, those may delete your history and they may not save your history. So that comes at the expense of it being less easier to use. So think of it this way. If you were to use like a web browser that remembers what you're doing, it will automatically start to suggest things that you may use to make your life easier. Say I go onto the internet and every morning I look up the weather, and I do that consistently over a period of time, say like weeks or even months, and in some cases, even just days. At that point, that browser may start recommending the weather app automatically as I open that browser, because it knows that that's where I'm going to go at that time. Another interesting example, and one that I think is important to bring up, um, is say I talk about like dog toys, or I look up dog toys over and over and over again. For some internet browsers, they may record that and then suggest ads that are related to dog toys. So that may be something to keep in mind. But on the flip side, say you're using a website that doesn't track your data, or doesn't save any information that you have. For certain websites, you may have to log in again and again and again and again every single time you go on. So there are certain trade-offs and benefits to each one, and I'll sort of talk to each of them as well. The difference between Google and Google Chrome, Google, one, is a company and it's also a search engine. So What a search engine is you can plug in information and it will give you back results relating to whatever words or phrases you put in on it. Google Chrome, on the other hand, is basically what hosts that. Um, so Yahoo has a search engine, which is Yahoo's search engine, but the internet browser is Yahoo. Or for instance, Safari has a search engine, which is Apple search engine. So it's kind of like tiered where Google Chrome is like the umbrella term, and then Google specifically is what works under Google Chrome. I know that can be kind of confusing, so I'll try and explain it in a little bit more detail on the next slide. Um, in terms of like recording your history, um, a variety of companies have put out statements on how they're using people's data. So Google has put out a statement on how they use your data. At that point, it's kind of hard to figure out what they're doing with it. So obviously, I use Google Chrome to host like these presentations because this presentation is on an application called Google Slides. Um, so because it's on Google Slides, it utilizes Google Chrome and Google as a whole. Um, that being said, I can go into my history and see all of the things that I've looked up. So I know that it inherently is recording my history, but I can go into the settings and then ask it to pause recording my history if I don't feel comfortable with it. There are also websites that just automatically do that. So DuckDuckGo, um, anything you look up on DuckDuckGo automatically won't be recorded. It'll just be deleted. And in fact, there isn't an option to look up your history on DuckDuckGo because the company itself stands by the mantra of not recording anybody's information. And again, that comes at the sacrifice of um, your browser not remembering certain things. So I guess something interesting to note is say you're on your internet browser and you start typing something and it automatically fills whatever's at the top for you, right? That can happen in some cases if you're looking something up over and over and over again. That's because your computer is suggesting that to you because it's recognized that you commonly go to that website. So if I go to Wikipedia a lot and I type in WIK and my internet browser completes that sentence for me where I just have to press enter to go to that website, it acknowledges that I've constantly or frequently go to that website and that it's more convenient for me, that it already can suggest or is one step ahead of me in terms of what website I should go to. But say you use a website that doesn't track your data, that's not always going to be the case. It won't always auto-populate whatever's at the top. So again, certain trade-offs. So with Firefox, when it comes to safety and simplicity, and I'll talk about all of these in a little bit more depth than what's on the slide. So Firefox is known to have a very simple interface. So there's not a lot on the page when you open it. There's not all these buttons and things that you have to figure out what they do. With Google Chrome, that can be the case. It can sort of differ from, you know, browser to browser. All of these, in comparison to competitors in the market, these are sort of like the top six for simplicity or safety or for ad blockers. So for Firefox, when it talks about safety and simplicity, Firefox is known to have very good safeguards against viruses. And it will sort of protect you from links that it feels can be a bit suspicious or what we have been known to call as like phishing ads, right? Or phishing scams, where if you click on a link, you give up your information. So Firefox is very good in being able to identify what those websites are and why they're dangerous, and will suggest to you as to why you shouldn't be going onto those websites in the first place. And again, it works on its own search engine as well. For Tor browser is sort of like a more recent project. I think it opened in 2008. It's not very popular. in terms of usage. So I'm sure like a lot of folks here may have never heard of Tor. I myself haven't heard of Tor prior to this presentation, but when I downloaded it and used it, I found it was very easy to navigate. Um, all of these will sort of serve the same purpose, right? Whatever you look up will pop up. If I go to any of these browsers and I look up what's the weather in Los Angeles, it will still produce a response from me. But again, as I mentioned before, it sort of comes down to accessibility, whether it's easy to navigate for you, whether it's intuitive for you to understand. Um, and obviously, when it comes to security, if those are um, if they're tracking your information or if they're not tracking your information, those are things to really keep in mind. All of these are fairly safe. I'm not going to throw an internet browser that's been known to, sort of, sell your information or to like give your information to the black market. Obviously, all six of these um, have demonstrated that they're cooperative, that they're safe to use, and that there's no issue with really using them on a day-to-day basis. Again, to the question earlier, you can also just delete your history as you see fit, right? If you go um, to whatever browser you're using and you look up how to find my history, you could sort of navigate, or it could show you how to find your history and you can clear it as you see fit, or even ask it to not track it for you. Um, Obviously, there are certain setbacks and certain things to keep in mind with each of these. So some of these are known to be notoriously slower than others. So, like Microsoft Edge and Firefox are both known to be a bit slower than the other competitors on here. With like Tor and Opera, it's a matter of popularity. They're just not as popular as the other ones because they don't come automatically on certain devices. If you're using Safari right now, there's a high chance that you're on an Apple device already, say a laptop or a desktop, or even like your iPad and iPhone. Those already come with Safari. So they may have better traction. Um, and so going back to the list, so Google Chrome, um, in terms of user simplicity, it's because it's easy to access um, across different platforms. So say I have like a Gmail account. So Gmail is Google's version of email, which I'll talk about emails in a little bit too. But for Google Chrome, it automatically interacts with everything that Google already owns. YouTube, Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Slides, Google Maps, your calendars, your email. And so all of those can be housed in one place that's accessible, i.e., Google Chrome. And in turn, you could also use it to look up certain things on the internet. It's free to make a Gmail account, and it already comes with the sheets, docs, and slides that I talked about. And so those are certain things to also keep in mind. With the DuckDuckGo web browser, that's also an important one to keep on here. I didn't put it on here exactly because in terms of usability, it will require you to really remember everything that you put down, like whether you're logging into certain websites or you're you know logging into your email. That's something you'll have to do time and time and time again. So again, that sort of comes at the expense of um, basically having your history wiped every time you go onto the website. But it is a good one to consider to use if you're comfortable with logging in over and over again for the purposes of security. Opera has a natural ad blocker. So ad blockers are things that you can add on to your internet browser, or in this case, it already comes with it. And it really is what the name suggests. It blocks ads. And so that could be very helpful if you're going onto like certain websites and you don't want to be proliferated by different ads popping up on the screen. This also works interestingly enough on YouTube. If you have an ad blocker while you're on YouTube, there's a high chance that you don't have to see any ads on YouTube. So that might be something of interest to look into. But again, it goes back to the idea of the dog toy story that I sort of talked about, where if you're constantly looking up dog toys or talking about dog toys and your internet or your browser starts recommending those ads to you, it may be wise to put on an ad blocker, so that way you don't sort of see those suggestive ads in the first place. Some ads too may just straight up be scams, so it's a good idea to block those as well. Microsoft Edge is sort of the updated Internet Explorer. So Internet Explorer was a pretty big browser during like the 2000s and 2010s. I sure as enough used it a lot, and then switched over when I went into high school. But Edge is sort of the updated version of Explorer. Explorer was known to be notoriously slow. Edge sort of has a leg up now, and can compete again with these top browsers. It does come at the expense of less safety. So a big discussion between, say, like Apple and Microsoft devices is that Apple automatically comes with virus security. And they always talk about like, oh, Apple devices are always very protected and things like that, versus Microsoft or Microsoft computers, which are more traditionally used by computer savvy folks, or like computer engineers, and they use it because it's more freeing. There are sort of like blinders on Apple devices that prevent you from having access to certain ads, or certain scams or things like that. But that at the end of the day, that sort of falls back down to how well or how savvy you are in navigating the internet and how much you really need out of your computer or device. For ad blockers on Opera, some of them are free. So I use Google Chrome, and I have an ad blocker that I downloaded as an extension, and it's for free, and it doesn't charge me anything for it. Some ad blockers may cost you money, so it's sort of good to look around as you go. Yeah, there are free ad blockers. And then Safari, the reason Safari is always suggested is because it's just readily available on Apple devices. As a person who comes from like an Apple family, I always sort of default to Apple when I'm teaching my parents how to use certain browsers, before having them move on to other ones. Because Safari is a very good place to start and sort of jump start off of. You sort of understand like bookmarks, or how to favorite a certain page, or how to look up certain things. There are a lot of things to consider on those. And then, as I mentioned before, different emails on different browsers. So there are the top 5 emails that are listed on this graphic here. So Proton Email, Gmail, Outlook, Yahoo Mail, and Zoho. Some of these may cost you, some of these won't. So for instance, Gmail, Outlook, and Yahoo Mail are usually free. And then Proton Mail and Zoho may have certain charges depending on storage or access to accounts. I'll talk about passwords saved by the browser in the app section. But I will say personally, as we're on this topic right now, I wouldn't recommend saving them on a browser, but rather saving them on like a separate app or in a separate place. Because if, say, your computer is compromised and they have access to your browser automatically, then they have access to all of your information. So in terms of like security, it's like security on top of security. Like you have a password to protect your passwords. Because for browsers, say I go to anyone's computer or even like a computer in a library, all of those automatically just have a browser on them that I can access. I don't usually need to put in a password to access Safari or to access Google Chrome. It's because that's not their purpose. Their purpose is, if I need to look up something on the internet, why do I need to, log into the internet, right? So that's sort of the rationale behind that. But I'll talk about different ways to save your passwords as we go along. For emails, certain questions to ask yourself: is it easy to maintain my inbox? Can I access the account from other email clients? So Google Chrome has an option where you can go from different Gmail accounts. So for me, as a graduating USC student, I have to start migrating all my emails over into my personal email account before my USC email is shut down. But because my personal email account is also a Gmail account, I could sort of forward a lot of the emails intended for my USC email, and they'll automatically go straight to my personal email. And that's because they're both on Gmail and it's easy to transfer documents that way. Also, for instance, like this PowerPoint in and of itself is hosted on Google Slides. I can share that with another person who has a Gmail account. So say my USC email gets compromised or is taken down because I'm a graduate, I can still access this via my personal email because they're both different type of Gmail accounts. So we're going to talk about some best apps to have. I threw in a few honorable mentions on there, including some USC apps, and then things just to keep in mind when you're downloading apps. I will say a lot of these apps are compatible for both Android and Apple. They may look different, certainly, but the purpose and what they intend to do is very much the same. So a lot of these, the next, I would say like 7 slides are sort of in this format. I'll sort of talk over the text just so that way for the sake of time. So if you have any questions or you want to read over the text, I'll defer to Bob to send out that PDF, and we'll also host the PDF somewhere else where you could go in and sort of look at what this text says and the suggestions. So MediSafe is a type of medication manager. Obviously, it's important to keep tabs on what medications and what prescriptions you're taking care of. So apps like these will sort of help you maintain like whatever medicinal regimen you're on, whatever prescription medications you need, or if your prescription is running low. So you would basically just put in whatever the dosage is, whatever period of time you're taking it for, and the app will sort of serve as like an agenda or like a calendar of sorts to remind you when to take certain medications, and if you're reaching the end of whatever that dosage period is, and how to get or when to get a refill and when to talk to your healthcare provider about that. Google Maps and then other various navigation apps are very helpful. So I personally recommend Google Maps. I will admit, though, I'm a guy who uses Waze when I drive, but Google Maps is very helpful. So you're just like walking around or even looking for different places around your neighborhood. Google Maps has very detailed maps and has a very interactive format where you can like pin locations, or you can look up different reviews of locations using the app. You can navigate, find different ways of transit. It's really one-stop shop for exploring places and going to other places near your home or even like across the world. Sometimes when I'm bored, I guess I'll go into Google Maps and go to some random country and just sort of walk around. As you can see, COVID really opened the door for what to do when you're bored. But Google Maps is a good app to also have on your phone. In the text that we talk about here, this is important. Say if you drive and you may forget like what parking structure you parked in or where on the street you parked. I remember my first day of USC. At USC, I thought my car was stolen, but then I just realized that I was in the wrong parking structure. And I almost had to call the Department of Public Safety to say that my car was stolen, but it wasn't. So Google Maps would have been helpful for me then, and it would have been helpful for me now. And so you can sort of save wherever you're parking in terms of parking structure and go back to the app and find it automatically. And so this is a good way to, again, to navigate and to get around. I will disclose that GoodRx is a prescription discount card. I also work for GoodRx, ironically. So I can sort of speak to this, but any app that really helps you save money on prescriptions, I think is well worth it. A big barrier in terms of why folks may not take their medication in the first place is because they can't afford it. And so if your insurance is cutting you slack, or if your insurance isn't cutting you slack, and certain medications aren't covered, depending on whatever plan you have or whatever tier you are or whatever your formulary says, GoodRx and other discount services, I think, are very helpful as a whole to really use and to employ as a, you know, whatever prescription you need. I've certainly have advised it for my parents who are on prescription medications, and it saves our family a lot of money. And it's a free app, simply said. LastPass. So for the question earlier about passwords,
This meeting is being
LastPass
recorded.
is a very cool app that allows you to save all of your passwords in one place. Okay.
Okay. Bye.
So yeah, sorry again. So LastPass is basically a password manager. It's think of it like a vault for your passwords, right? You could sort of keep everything in there, and in and of itself, it's protected by whatever password you need for LastPass. So as the text sort of talks about, in this scenario, the only thing you would have to really remember is your password for LastPass, and it will sort of help maintain all of your passwords for other devices as you need them. So for like emails or for like bank accounts or for Amazon or for a variety of things, you could sort of see, as long as you know your password for LastPass, you can sort of go on there, download or check whatever password it is, put it into your thing, and then use that. I guess on this topic, so the question about VPNs are very valuable. Um, they sort of protect you in a variety of ways. For work, we use a VPN, and so I think of it very highly, as a way to sort of protect your information, and then also protect what you're going about doing. Whether you should have it on all the time, I usually would recommend that you do. Obviously, some VPNs may charge you based on the time that you're using it for, or they may have like a different option where they charge you by month. In terms of frugality, that may be something to look into, but personally, I would try to keep it on as frequently as possible. For people who don't know VPNs basically protect you while you're navigating the internet. They're sort of like, think of it like a little force field around you as you're navigating the internet, that protects you from malware or any other things. So it's sort of like an antivirus or anti-malware sort of software, but more higher up and rather than immediately on your computer. In terms of in terms of like paying for password managers, I personally would just try to use whatever is free, since there is like a good deal of apps out there. Usually, the ones that are most well trusted and free are the ones to use. So, for all the apps on here, for everybody's sake, we sort of put in like the rankings and then also how many people have sort of responded or reviewed them. So for LastPass, I mean, they have 35,000 reviews and they're ranking pretty high. In previous presentations, we've talked about Bitwarden. So Bitwarden is also like an alternative one that's also free. And depending on how many passwords you need, that's when charges may be incurred. So if I need to save it for like 50 passwords, it may charge me 99 cents per month. VPN. I forget what VPN stands for, so let me quickly double check. But again, it sort of serves as like a overarching protection for when you browse. So it's called a virtual private network. So it sort of establishes like a direct connection to the internet and sort of encrypts all of your traffic. So encrypting is basically putting all of your data in a language that isn't easily accessible to people who are trying to take your information, sort of like codifying your information in a way that it's not immediately accessible. So VPN, and it stands again for virtual private network. Okay. There are some fun ones on here. Obviously, a lot of these are recommendations based off of what's on the internet, and then also are sort of vetted by me by proxy. But I do think, games that allow you to interact with other people are very well worth it. There are a lot of games where, you're just sort of playing by yourself. And I think while those are valuable in and of themselves, so say like Luminosity or different brain games, I think Words with Friends sort of approaches it in a different way where you can interact with other people and sort of chat with them as you're going along. So if you're not familiar with Words with Friends, it's basically Scrabble on your phone. That's basically that's the entire gist of it. And you can play with friends and add friends and sort of join different tournaments or whatever. um, and it's not a very big time commitment. You can sort of play a game, come back, and it doesn't have to be something done in like one sitting. um, when you use VPNs, if it does slow you down, it may be an issue with the browser or with like your processing power. So VPNs, um, I guess I'll sort of take a quick segment on VPNs. So um, VPNs, there are a lot of different ones on the internet. If you even just look up the word VPN, there are different ones that you can use. I personally have no recommendations as to which ones to use and which ones not to use. That may sort of just be at the discretion of price. Um, it will basically establish your connection, and sort of pinpoint you in a different location. So it when it encrypts your information, it sort of puts you somewhere else. So you may be using your computer in the United States, right? But if you have a VPN to someone else, it may look like you're using your computer in another country. And that's sort of what the purpose of that private network is to sort of protect you from people sort of getting into your space. Um, Again, if it's slowing down your computer, it may be an issue with your browser or with your computer as a whole. I would, though, suggest maybe switching VPNs. Again, there's like a variety of companies. So if there's another one that has a free trial and you use it and it's not slowing down your computer, that may be the quickest fix. But if it's not adjusting at all, then it may return to whatever browser you're using or what information you have on your computer. Um, to set up VPNs, you can usually just set them up at home on your computer. It's sort of just like downloading something onto your computer, and it will just sort of give you like a login, and you sort of set that up on your own, like using an email and a password, and then it will automatically connect you to whatever private network that is. And then if you have your AOL email, I'm not sure what happened to AOL. I know one of my parents has like a Hotmail, and then that was acquired and it became an Outlook email. So if you're still receiving emails on it, I imagine that it would work. Um, Maybe consider switching to another email or having a backup email just in case. Um, I I guess this is a testament to my age, but I'm not too familiar with AOL. And I personally haven't seen a lot of AOL emails when I communicate with other people. But again, if it works, I see no issue as to keeping it.
Mm, mm, mm.
So Spotify and then other music apps, a lot of these are free. Some of them will require paid subscriptions. So for Spotify Premium, depending on your plan, I think it's like $1.99 a month or more. If you do like a family plan and you share it with your kids or with your friends or with your loved ones, that's another opportunity as well. Um, and then magnifying glass / flashlight. Again, this is one that's been recommended. I personally recommend this to folks that I work with in person when I was at USC, and a lot of my professors would talk about this app. Um, at least when they talk to college students, they're like, yeah, you don't really think about this a lot, but it really is very valuable to have something like this, because to have the flashlight or to have like the camera independently can be a real hassle. Like if you need to see something in the dark, it's one thing to give it light, but it's another thing to actually see what's on the page, right? So this app sort of combines the two in one. Jeannie, I'll get to your question real quick. I'm just going to try and wrap up this section. So Apple Books and Audible and reading apps. Again, if you're a big reader, but you're not a fan of print, these are good alternatives where, like, the biggest thing is like you can adjust the font and you can adjust the color tones or things like that. So sometimes if it's too harsh on the eyes, you could sort of change the color and make it more warmer tones or more colder tones. If it's too small, say like on the page, you can increase the font and make it easier to read. And they both offer, excuse me, free trials and recommendations. And it saves paper. So those are all big pros. I'll leave it right here. I'm going to answer Ginny's question real quick. So when it comes to Google Chrome on your devices, so let's see. So with Gmail, think of it, so for Gmail, you would have like different email accounts. So I'll sort of speak to my experience, and then if you still have any questions, I'm happy to do it one-on-one with you and figure out if there's like an issue with the computer itself. But so for me, I have like my personal email. So I'll say my personal email and my work email. My work email is langelo@usc.edu. And that's the email that I use to have folks email me if they have questions about GeroTech. And then my personal email is one that I use to like email like birthday cards or like family, or to like use for like my Amazon. So that's more personal things to me. If I were to go onto a computer, like any random computer, or even buy a new computer and open up Google Chrome or Safari, or just log into my Gmail, if I log into my work email, I should only have access to items that are on that work email. So in your case, if I have like photos of like my homework or like tests, or like study guides, studies for class, if I log into my work email on this new computer, those are the only things that I should be seeing. And then on my personal Gmail, say I have photos of like my family or my friends or my dog, I shouldn't be seeing those photos if I'm logging into a computer using my work email. And so they're sort of separate entities. Each of them has their own like email. So langelo@usc.edu isn't the same email for my personal Gmail. Similarly, they may have different passwords. So if you log into your work email and you log into your personal email, they may have different passwords to begin with. And so in your case, I think it's interesting that that's what happened. I would just double check your Gmail and sort of see what's going on there. Sometimes we may not be aware that like our accounts may sync together, or that we're putting images in a Gmail account that we didn't want them to go into the first place. So if I put like family photos on my work email, sometimes I may just forget that I had done that in the first place. Or if I also, if I share across different Gmail accounts, they may also be the case. So for instance, everybody here is like familiar with like folders, right? So you can have like folders on your computer where you just store a bunch of things. For Google Chrome, you can also have folders where you save a lot of information. What makes Google Chrome special is that you can share that entire folder with someone else. So if I shared an entire folder of photos of my family and friends to my work email, if I log into my work email, I can still see that folder because it's been shared with me. So that may also be a discrepancy that we want to try to avoid if we want to keep things isolated on one side for different emails, right? So in that case, it can be a little bit confusing, but sorry, let me double check. Oh, interesting. Okay. So I think with I'm not too sure what happened there. I think the best thing to do would either be to just log out, or to double check with your employer as to what um, your email is, because sometimes for employment, maybe they ask for like your personal email as a way to contact you, and that might be synced with your work email. I've certainly had friends who have had that issue before, like when they got first jobs, that because the company had their personal email as a way to contact them about employment, that somehow got transferred to their work email. So that may be something to chat about with your employer just to double check. Um, Worst case scenario is you sort of transfer everything off to another Gmail account and just wipe one of your Gmail accounts, so that way that overlap doesn't carry over. But I hope, and I really do hope that that's not the case. It may just be something to chat with your employer, like with your IT department, to see what the issue is and why that's happening for you. I hope that answers your question. I know that doesn't get right to the point of it, but I can imagine there are some like logistical things that may be happening that you and I aren't like super aware of. So for other options of apps, I threw a bunch on here. Obviously, I do use Waze. Apple Maps has their own version, so if you're on an Apple device, you'll automatically have Apple apps. If you're not a fan of Spotify, that's totally reasonable. Pandora, Apple Music alternatives. Messenger. For those of you, if you were here for the Facebook presentation, we talked about Messenger as a way to communicate with people in sync with your Facebook profile. So if you have a Facebook profile and you add people, you can communicate with them using Messenger. And that's sort of like any text app that you can use on the internet. Transit, Lyft, Uber, all things you could use to get around town, similar to the navigational apps. These just provide the mode of transportation. So obviously with Lyft and Uber, you can call one of those. With Transit, that sort of shows you the best way to get somewhere using solely public transportation. I use it a lot when I was at USC and I didn't have my car at the time. And as a commuter student, it's helpful to have transit available to you. DoorDash, obviously like Uber Eats is something on there, but I didn't want to put Uber on there twice because they shouldn't get that much publicity on this slide. Both apps to use if you're hungry or if you want to get food and you want to sort of deliver, very easy apps to use. And Trojan's Game Day and then Classical KUSC, both apps from the University of Southern California that you can use. KUSC is basically a radio. There's also KXSC, which is the student-run radio, but KUSC is the classical version of it. Trojan's Game Day is things related to sports and to the athletics department. I'm going to quickly blitz through these last few slides. There's quite a few more, but I'll sort of talk very quickly over them. So again, sorry. So work-related apps. So obviously, a lot of folks, if you need to like type something up, or if you need to use spreadsheets, or if you need to make PowerPoints, like I'm using now, there are a variety of options here. So there's Pages, there's Word. These are both ways to type up any document, whatever that is. If you need to type up a letter, or if you need to fill out a certain document, these are both applications that you could use. And the sort of input is very similar. So as a whole, the difference between the Apple ones and the Microsoft ones, so Apple will sort of be Pages, Sheets, and Keynote. Those come on Apple devices. So similar to Safari, if you open up any device, you're automatically going to get those. For Word, you may have to download those and you may have to purchase them, but they're more commonly used basically everywhere. Like for work or for even personal use, I've always seen that people have defaulted to Microsoft over Apple products just because they have more options and it's more comprehensive. Numbers in Excel, same deal. If you need to calculate something or if you need a spreadsheet, sometimes people use spreadsheets as a way to create a schedule because it's already in that box shape style. So it's easier to just go about your day using a spreadsheet versus having to create like a bunch of boxes on Word or Pages. So people would use numbers in Excel. Numbers is the Apple product, Excel is the Microsoft product. If you have a USC email, I'm going to say this with a grain of salt. Usually USC emails allow you to download Microsoft Suite and Microsoft Office, which would give you access to all of the Microsoft products I'm talking about. As somebody with a USC email, that's how I got Microsoft Office on my computer, was through my USC email. And finally, Keynote and PowerPoint. So PowerPoint's obviously what I'm presenting here is a type of PowerPoint. But Apple has its own version called Keynote, and then there's PowerPoint, which is Microsoft's version. All that being said, Google also has its own variants of it. You may have heard about these in the news as they've recently have changed their layout, which was apparently a really big thing for people. But for people who have been asking in the chat as well, like if you have Google Chrome or a Gmail account and you make a Gmail account, you automatically get these three options. So Docs, Sheets, and Slides, which all correspond to the order of the slides that we have. These are all free. They're easy to use. And again, they automatically come when you have a Gmail. And unlike Apple and Microsoft's products, they're very easy to share and to update in real life time. So what I mean by that is, say I write a letter on a Word document and I send that to Bob. Bob would have to work on that Word doc independently and send it back to me. But if I send him a Google Doc, as shown here on the left, the blue icon, if I send him a Google Doc, we can both work on that document at the same time without having to send it back and forth. But again, remember, these are only accessible to people with Gmail accounts. So if Bob didn't have a Gmail account and I shared one of these with him, he probably couldn't access it. So let me answer a few questions. If we want to have a conversation about GPT, I'll save it for the end just because it is a bit of a complicated subject. So just bear with me for like 2 minutes. And then if you have a new computer, you would have to log into your USC email and then I think using whatever internet browser that is, and then it would bring you to a website that allows you to download it. I'll quickly run over social media. Again, we've covered all of these topics before. And so I'll sort of share our master document with all of our presentations on it, and then we'll open it up to general questions. So Facebook, you can add friends and see what's going on the news. It's very easy to meet people from, say, prior to the internet, and or prior to even like Facebook and social media as a whole, and sort of see what they're up to. So to follow up with different people and to join different groups. Instagram is sort of similar, but it's more photo focused. So in order to post on Instagram, it needs to be accompanied by a photo. Versus Facebook, you could just post any sort of text. But Instagram was recently acquired by Facebook, so it's sort of like the same thing now. Twitter is very fast paced, short characters, so you don't really have a lot of space to type, and it's very fast. A lot of journalists use Twitter because it allows for quick updates on the fly. You don't need to accompany your message with a photo in order to do it. And so among those three, again, Facebook is easy for organization. So for organizing very large events, Instagram is very photo based, and then Twitter is like real time. So very fast paced. There are also things like LinkedIn, which is more for like job opportunities and networking. You can sort of look at different companies and see what they're up to. Again, this is a very occupation job based platform of social media. And then YouTube, which we've also talked about before, which is the sort of video social media service where you can watch different videos. There are different types of videos, live videos, standard videos, curated mix. So live videos is, say you're like watching live TV, everything's happening at that moment, and you can watch live videos on YouTube. Standard videos are things that have already been uploaded. So you could see in the middle, it was uploaded 6 years ago, but I could still watch it. I mean, curated mixes are more based off of music. So if I listen to a lot of music using YouTube, YouTube will, sort of similar to how we talked about at the beginning, will recognize that I'm listening to a certain genre of music or that I have my favorites and offer a list of music that I can listen to. And there's the search function that allows you to look at different videos on YouTube. I think we hit time. Okay. I think I'm right on time. Okay, sweet. So yeah, thank you for everybody who came today. We have one more presentation for this semester on the 23rd of April about cybersecurity. So bring your questions about passwords and things like that. I'll answer the questions that are in the chat, but I'm going to toss it over to Bob for any closing comments. And I will also pause, or I'll pause the recording after you're done, Bob. So I'll hand it off to you.
Okay. I guess first of all, I want to thank everybody for joining today. I took a lot of notes. That helps me remember at least 10% of what Lois is talking about. I will send out a recording and the PowerPoint from today's presentation within the next couple of days. I'd say if you don't get it by midweek, there's been a glitch, so email me and we'll make sure you get a copy. Along with the recording, I'll be making my annual request for ideas and topics that you would like to be covered in these technology workshops. We will, along with the GeroTech group and the Emeriti Center, probably end of this month or beginning of April, be coming up with a plan for what we're going to do starting August, September. So would appreciate hearing what you'd like us to be covering, and that's the best way to communicate. I think you also have my email address on all the invitations that I send out. So if you have any questions regarding that side of what's going on, don't hesitate to send me an email. Thank Lois for going beyond the call of duty to make this presentation, and he'll be involved in the next presentation, but he is working. He does have another life. So again, thank you very much, Lois. That's all from this end. I don't know if there are any other questions, Lois, you want to address, but otherwise I think we're adjourned.